I apologize.
And
I just
we're live
thought it
now.
was too.
Excellent. Today is Friday, March 17th. This is the Senate Government Operations Committee, and we have 4 bills for 4 leaves of a lucky clover to pass today. And thank you for being with us early. And we're going to start with S42, an act relating to divestment of state pension funds and investments in the fossil fuel industry. You all should have a clean copy of the version that we basically approved yesterday, but didn't get a chance to vote on. I'm not sure that our legislative council is able to join us, but the changes in this draft are what we discussed yesterday, with the change of dates for the review to December 15th, 2023. You can see on page 2 the review, and then there are 2 sections in the report on the bottom of page 3. There's the first one that's due on February 15th, 2024, and that's a report on the review that's due in December. And then there is, on the next page, it's split up into 2 sections now because there are 2 dates. The next page is on September 1st, 2024, and that is a report on the plan. And Becky did want us to note that paragraph B has language that allows this committee to meet to discuss this report in the off session. It basically gives us authority in the bill to meet if we want to. And it's just a may.
And the reason this is particularly important for those of you who will be, for any of us who will be running again and may have any hope of being reelected, is that, oh no, it'll be a new biennium. So you won't have a deadline.
So
we won't have a December 1st deadline.
We won't have a December 1st deadline, but it does give.
It gives us a heads up for drafting.
Yeah, if we want to. And it's not just our committee, it's the House committee. So we could even do a joint committee with the two.
Which is great.
So this is, she wanted to make sure that we saw that, because that was,
Yeah.
And then those were the changes that were made, I believe. Oh, no, I'm sorry, the final one, yeah, thank you. On the bottom of page 5, changing the appropriation, having it and only doing 1 position, because as discussed, they don't need 2 positions in the first year. So those were the changes that we all discussed yesterday. And I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we adopt draft 1.7 of S42 favorably, that we voted out favorably.
Okay, there's been a motion. Is there any further discussion? Senator Wiehoski.
Thank you. I am really thankful for the work that this committee has done, and I will support this bill, but I am so concerned that it is so narrowly focused on fossil fuel divestment and not the larger picture of environmental and social justice governance. It's the 11th hour, so I'm not going to ask for any changes, and I'm really deeply committed to doing something that moves in this direction. But I don't want to be back here in 10 years when we discuss that when we discover that our investments in biofuels are deforesting Brazil. And I hope that we will really look at in the future how we build a stronger structure and plan for ESG governance and just a broader picture on how we are grounding our investments.
Thank you. Senator Clarkson.
And this bill is only a bit along its journey. We are just beginning the journey, even in this session. So this, as we know, this bill will now go to appropriations, and then it will go to the House, where it will have a lot of opportunity to fill in other aspects.
Okay.
And they address all sorts of issues.
Is there further discussion? All right, Senator Clarkson.
I'm thrilled we are where we are. I think we have we brought many of the most important players to bear on this issue. I think we've had really thoughtful, important testimony. While I'm disappointed with VPIC, they're with us on a lot of aspects of this. We're growing, I'm hoping, increasingly in the same direction. And I live in hope And I'm really excited to be here today. And I think it's our Senate Government Operations contribution to our work on reducing climate change.
Excellent. Anyone else? All right. The clerk shall call the roll.
Senator Bohowski,
Yes.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Norris, yes. Senator Watson,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Chair Hardy,
Yes.
and the reporter.
The reporter will be Senator Clarkson. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really proud of our committee.
Well done. And thank you all. And
Okay,
One done, one done.
go one done. Yes, I should have a bottle. Okay, thank you, Senator Norris. We are gonna move right along to S39.
Oh, I need a full copy. Take it on it. Sure.
Yeah.
I think I have a
And
break.
we might have a break. Depends how fast we work. S39 is the act related to compensation and benefits for members of the Vermont General Assembly. You should also have a clean copy. Olivia, it's amazing, in front of you. I think Jen may be joining us, but for efficiency's sake, I'm gonna just start going through it. The changes that were made, the first section is about the professional development and so that we can have off session for professional development and also for the whatchamacallit?
I can't find that.
The first page is for participating in professional development activities in or out of state.
Right.
And, oh, okay, this is
It's all
just,
professional.
it's all professional development.
Change, so it'll be
Yeah.
applied to the General Assembly and not staff.
That's right. And then, then the same for the speaker and the pro tem. And then the second section is on health benefits, saying that we would be eligible for the same health benefits as state employees. And then starting on top of page 5, the compensation. There's the intent language that Senator Clarkson suggested that would receive compensation consistent with the amount of the average wage earned in the state.
Sorry, what page is that again?
That's the top of page 5. Jen created a separate section, an intent section, so that it's clear where we got the numbers. And then there is the section for the president pro tem and the speaker that's separate. And this just increases theirs by the same proportion that an average member's was increased. And then starting and the next page is the reimbursements for the speaker and the pro tem. And then starting on top of page 7 is the compensation for sort of non-leadership members or, non-pro tem speaker members. And which is based on the average, and it's trued up or estimated true up for the for 2025. As you know, this is a clean 20 years since the last time we did this. And then there is adjournment compensation, which is the 1 day a week based on the new rate of compensation. Then expenses and mileage, and these are, hey Jen, I'm just going through the bill because
So we're so
we're on
excited.
page 9.
Okay, is that me?
I don't know, it might be, yes. So
I think I pointed out all the things from yesterday, but if you want to do your spiel, we were just.
Jen Kirby, Legislative Council. Sure, so the changes I made from yesterday are clarifying that language about the reimbursement of expenses for professional development activities being separate from that piece with staff and including a few additional references to the professional development activities in section 1. Clarifies what you were going for. I added on page 5 a new section at the beginning of the subchapter on compensation for members of the General Assembly and legislative intent, expressing legislative intent that members of the General Assembly should receive compensation that is consistent with the amount of the average wage earned in this state.
Thank you.
And I think the only other changes were just because I had added in that new section to make some conforming changes in the appropriations, references in the appropriation section, and I put in parentheticals just in case we move things around again, make sure we're describing the right sections. And then for the effective dates, moving those numbers for sections after section 3. That's it.
Excellent. Are there any questions for Jen before we vote? Senator Clarkson?
Oh, we can discuss it after I put the motion on the floor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to move that we vote out favorably draft 3.1 of S39. And then I have a comment.
Do you have the sheet for Senator?
Yes, I do.
Is there further discussion? Senator Clarkson?
I would just like to say, having sponsored several bills to address this issue in different capacities, in different bienniums, and as the one present here who was the beneficiary of the first resetting of this pay in 2005, I have to say, I am thrilled we are here at this moment with this bill, and congratulations. Well done, everybody.
Further discussion? All right, the clerk will call the roll.
Yes, he will. Senator Bohowski,
Yes.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Norris, yes. Senator Watson,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Indeed, yes.
Chair Hardy,
Yes. Thank you, Jen, for all your work on this.
Sure.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And
You're welcome.
I really appreciate
Have
Ruth.
the electronic version to send, or however you're supposed to bring it up to the.
Yes, as the,
Secretary.
and I'll be,
Senator White will report, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and you'll get any questions as you prepare.
yes, I will.
Thanks, Jen.
Right, sure. Have a great weekend, everyone.
I can give you the bills from the other bienniums that I've been.
Yes, I think
I've
I'm
been
going to
looking
be,
them up.
I'm gonna be the funnel of questions from legislators over the next weekend, so.
Oh, this is
very
back to me.
HR, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Becca's, it'll be like, ooh. Becca's, you can set up a shingle.
Tell me what
You know
you
what,
want to know.
this is great, and what I really hope this does is, it means we have more people who are able to serve in this incredible institution. It's just, I hope that this begins to reduce the barriers to serving.
Absolutely.
So,
And
I'm thrilled.
we are waiting for Maria, who I know is probably still making changes. But we have, and we can, why don't we take a little bit of a break
Great.
until Maria comes?
Oh, I
But
can
please
make
don't go
one.
too far. And if you can let the witnesses know if they're there,
Yeah.
that we're still waiting for the draft. I don't want to take testimony before we have a draft because
Sheriff and then dispatcher, dispatch and then sheriff.
we're doing, yeah, because we don't have our sheriff attorney until 2.
Oh, okay.
So we're hoping to, oh, Maria, okay, we'll stay live.
Is that to eat my avocado sandwich?
And you can let, it's just Barb and Jen, right? The commissioner
Yes.
and the director. So if
Those
they want to come in, they can, otherwise they can watch and if it's up to them.
I got some from this way.
You can let them. Ooh, they are still warm.
So
Literally.
it's, this is the difference, do you remember, you're too young still, but Bob and I will remember when things would, at school would come out of the mimeograph machine and you smell them. Yeah. Oh my God, and so
Those
this is.
Very
warm and
toxic
purple.
chemicals in those mimeographs.
That's okay, I'm still here, I made it this
You're
year.
telling me that printing
I
used
told
to have
you.
a smell?
Yes. Don't you remember the mimeograph
Yes.
machine had that?
Oh, yes.
Oh my God.
It's like an elementary school smell for me, like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, Bob doesn't remember that.
I have no idea.
Hi, Commissioner, hi, Director.
They remember.
We were literally talking about the memory of the smell from the Ditto machine. Do you
Yes,
remember
the
that?
mimeograph machine.
And if you got chosen to do the dittos and you
Yes,
would run
and you
them
would do it.
in the teacher's lounge, it was
This was
always
the
like such
action.
an honor to
Oh
be
my
a kid that got to run the dittos.
Wow,
Yes.
so.
That's
did
how
it
it
get
finishes
a-
career start. You're just not quite old enough.
That, it marks us, what can I tell you?
It's kind of funny. We just got a new draft. Literally, Maria just walked in the room with a new draft, which hopefully takes into consideration some of the things that you said yesterday. So I apologize for doing this to you yet again and giving you a draft that you're just seeing. We are also just seeing it. It is posted now, so you should be able to get it on our website. And Maria's gonna walk through the changes that were made, and then we'll hear from both of you and also be really assured that this has a long way to go and there'll be more opportunities. So go ahead, Maria.
Great, Maria Royal with Legislative Council. Forgot how to say my name now. So, okay, so this is the third draft. It's draft 3.2. And basically everything that you agreed to yesterday that was highlighted in yesterday's draft is now in here and the highlighting is removed. So only new revisions as of yesterday are included here. And so we will go through those. And of course, stop me at any point. So the first one on page 2, the only thing I wanted to note, you'll see on line 16, the only change there, I noticed in the bill, I used the phrase dispatching services, and I think the general, usually it's dispatch services. So I just wanted to make a technical change there. I just wanted to point that out. This is the only place where I highlighted it, but I just wanted to flag it. So then if you
Senator Hardy, could I interrupt? I'm very
Yes.
sorry. I don't know if Commissioner is seeing it, but I am not seeing the draft.
Refresh.
Yeah, if you refresh your.
Oh, okay,
Probably see it.
apologies.
Looks like
Yeah.
Commissioner, can you see it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can, but I had to dig for it. I'll send it to you, Barb.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Olivia can send it to both of you, but it should be on our website now on today's date. Draft again, 3.2.
3.2, okay,
the
thank
one we're
you.
looking at.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem, at any time.
So then if you turn to page 9, so this is the membership of the new Public Safety and Communications Board. A proposal to expand the membership to 11 from existing 9. And so you still have, you'll see 1 and 2 are the same, and these are existing positions. Subdivision 3 on line 10. Right now, there's 1 official of the municipality appointed by the governor. The proposal here is to increase that to 2 municipal officials appointed by the LCT. And then further specifying from different geographical regions of the state, 1 of whom shall represent a municipality with low population density and 1 of whom shall represent a municipality with high population density. And then under 4, 1 firefighter appointed by the governor, as opposed to the Vermont Career Fire Chiefs.
Yes. It solved 2 problems, so yes.
And so, yes, so you'll notice that the governor is more actively involved in making appointments here. So also in subdivision 5, 1 emergency medical technician or paramedic appointed by the governor. 6 is the same. And then 7 on page 10, 1 public member appointed by the governor And one, who shall have expertise in finance instead of the Senate Committee on Committees. And then 8, one public mentor, again appointed by the governor, not the Speaker of the House, who shall have technical expertise in public safety communication systems. Proposal to add 1 professional dispatcher appointed by the governor. And then 10 is the same. So that's a total of 11.
And I'm just gonna stop you there to sort of talk through this sort of logic on this. Oh, actually, if you wanna finish about the board, and then we can
Sure,
talk the logic about it a little bit.
So still down in subsection C on page 10, still 3-year terms. Just to get at the staggering a little bit, the governor's appointee shall serve an initial term of 4 years instead of 3. And then I think you also wanted to bring back what was an existing law, but in a different subsection on page 11. In appointing members to the board, the governor shall give due consideration to the different geographical regions of the state and the need for balance between rural and urban areas. And then lastly, just on the board, you'll see in subsection D on line 10, the governor shall annually appoint a member to serve as board chair and a member to serve as board vice chair. So reverting to the governor making those decisions.
So,
Which is existing law.
right.
Is that existing law? I was gonna say, why doesn't the committee get to decide?
Yeah, that's existing law, and this was trying to react to a few things that we heard yesterday about the board composition, and Commissioner, your point about the governor being more, retaining direct involvement in the board. So we added members from the local level, added another appointee of a municipal official. And we did hear from local officials, in fact, the chair of the VLCT board, that she appreciated having VLCT reps. So we wanted to make sure that there were the local towns of 2 different sizes felt, included. So that's that. And then we had the whole conversation about what fire organization should appoint. So we just gave it to the governor to appoint, and he can figure it out. And the same with EMS, but wanting to specify a little bit more about those appointees. And then the chief Association of Chiefs Police and Sheriffs Association would appoint their own folks. The Department of Public Safety, the commissioner would appoint, and then the public members would all be appointed by the governor, as would the dispatcher, but they would have specific expertise in order to try to really fill out the sort of areas of the board. And just to assure any current board members, they would not be kicked off the board. They would either fill out their term and could be reappointed if they fit one of these. So that was our attempt to try to listen to the feedback we were hearing. The governor would still have the majority of appointees on the board and would have the ability to appoint the chair. So that was attempting to listen to all the things we were hearing yesterday. So, Senator Bukowski.
Yeah, I actually have a little bit of concern with it being so heavily appointed by the governor, and that may limit perspectives from differing places. And one place I feel like we could shift that would be the professional dispatcher, and having that instead appointed by the State Employees Association.
Okay, well, let's think about that, because not all dispatchers are state employees. I think most of them probably are not state employees. So this would give the option of a local dispatcher or a state dispatcher. But let's think about that.
Yeah.
And let's,
And I'd just like to ask, because Maria deals with lots of these, it is so unusual to have a committee or a board, have someone outside that committee or board determine who leads it. So I just always, and not just with this, but I have a real problem with that. I think that boards ought to be able to determine their own leadership. I understand it's current law to have the governor appoint the chair of the board. But I do think there is a dynamic within a board that really, and I feel this just across the board, we often identify who's gonna appoint the chair. And I really have a problem with that, but I'm happy to let it go now and the House can look at it, but to me, that's just an internal leadership, the people on that group should determine who leads.
One of the, well, I don't know, Senator Norris, you and I had a conversation about this, so do you want to weigh in a little bit about it?
Well, I'd like to give the governor a little respect. I mean, I'm sure that he has people, if he himself is not capable, I'm sure he'll be discussing this with many of the people who do sit on boards and whatever else, and get recommendations from them. And it's been in law now for as long as we can remember. And I don't have any problem with this whatsoever. I think it's the way that it should be.
And the composition of the board as reworked in this draft, are you comfortable with that?
I am very much. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner, I know you had weighed in on this issue yesterday, and I'm just wanting, I know you're just seeing it, but I'm wondering.
She must be happy.
Oh, gosh, you guys are so good for me to keep me on my toes. I love it. So I spent, this is the only part of the bill that I had time to really contemplate and get some feedback on since last night, was the composition of the two boards, the emergency communicate, or the public safety communications board, and then I'm calling it the transitional board.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that you added a dispatcher, a person actually doing the work, and that should be in both boards. The best I could do is come up with a 15-member board, and I'll just explain to you where I think we differed a little bit. I think that we have to have a voice from the volunteer fire service. It is like 80% of Vermont is covered by volunteers. That's a statistic I'm making up, but I know it's not far off. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. It's a large majority of the state that is covered by volunteer services. And so if we make the governor pick between the two, it's going to just bring back the same tension that it would have been if we only picked one from the piece of statute. So the best I could do is come up with 15 by adding a rep from the volunteer fire service. I proposed to add a second VLCT rep as well, which represented a +1 to the original, a +1 for the DPS commissioner. So the commissioner plus a rep from either Vermont Emergency Management, Vermont State Police, which currently includes dispatchers, or fire safety. And I propose to include ADS, a representative from the Agency of Digital Services. I know that we have on your list a member appointed by Senate committee, or maybe it's not there anymore. I'm sorry.
It's not anymore, but yeah.
Okay, never mind that. I ended up with 15 people. I'd be happy to, now that I'm seeing the new one, take a closer look, but I do appreciate in particular adding the subject matter expertise of a dispatcher. I do think ADS needs to be there. And I do think the volunteer fire chiefs need to be there.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. It's funny when you're saying that, because those suggestions that you just made, we literally have added those people to the interim board, the transitional board. ADS is on there. You get 2 appointees, yourself plus somebody else, or designee plus somebody else. We added both a volunteer and a professional firefighter on the other one, so the firefighters get 2. So I mean, we can go over that one. Why don't we mull this one in comparison to the other one? But Barb, did you want to say anything about that?
May I make one distinction?
Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
One small distinction. This is total nitpicking, but anything that goes in writing, it should be career firefighter, not professional firefighter,
Oh, really?
because
Okay.
they are all professionals, and the
Yeah.
volunteers train very hard to be professional. Career firefighters.
I think in the other one, we say 1 firefighter from career, 1 firefighter from volunteer.
Roger that.
You can
Thanks.
look at it when we get there, but Senator Clarkson?
Thank you, Jennifer. I am reporting the firefighter bill out of the Senate Economic Development Committee. And so I will give you 2 things. 270 career firefighters in Vermont and over 5,000 volunteers. So you're absolutely right. It's way skewed. And we use the term career.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Lots of firefighters. Barb, did you want to weigh in on the board composition at the moment?
Sure. Well, as I was listening to Commissioner describe her 15-member thoughts, I didn't object to any of those things. And then you said that all of those people are now on the transitional board, which might be sufficient, or maybe they could be on the transitional board. And then at a later time, there's a decision made about whether they should be included on I'll call it the full board, further down the road. I think that they're all appropriate members of either body.
Okay, yeah, and the transitional thing is an advisory committee,
Right.
I think we call it, and they're to advise during the transition. We did extend their life a little bit, and one thing that we could do, I think Barb's suggestion about maybe like we could add it to the recommendations that we're seeking next year, about should the permanent board composition be modified, or recommendations for any necessary modifications to the permanent board. Would that sort of split the
Yes.
whatever?
Maybe.
I hate the term split the baby.
I think that would be a good placeholder for that conversation. Yes.
And I think it's really important to maintain a little bit of flexibility because we have not fully defined the scope of the work. So how do we know what subject matter expertise we need?
Yeah, that's a good point too. So having the recommendation back would be helpful after the transition period figures out what they have to do. Yeah, okay. So maybe, Maria, did you catch that? We can add that
That
as,
recommendation back.
yeah, okay,
But
perfect.
should you want to leave this for now as it is drafted?
Yeah, I
in
think-
terms of- Okay.
Are people, can they live with what's here right now as the board that's in the draft, and then we'll get recommendations back next January about whether or not there are changes that need to be made. And that would be before this board actually goes into operation, because this board goes into operation on July 1st, 2024 in the draft. So,
Yes, as long as there's an opportunity to rejigger this and get closer to where we talked about, then that would be fine.
okay, great.
Yep. Agreed.
Great. And committee, we're feeling okay.
We have another whole session to keep honing this to perfection.
Good Lord willing.
All right, good Lord willing, yes. All right, so, well, let's move on, Maria. Thank you, everyone.
So now we're moving on to page 12. The bottom is the beginning of the board's responsibilities and powers. So some changes on page 13. One, just a technical change, getting rid of Python and geocoding. That's an existing one. But then I'll read through what's highlighted here, because some of them are new. But what I noticed in my hasty drafting a couple of days ago, if you turn to page 14, you'll see there's all that stricken language. That's not really going away. It's just being incorporated into the appropriate subsections, right? So, and some of it's going to be in the rulemaking section, and some of it's going to be in general responsibility. So we'll just read through them now to make sure. So for example, on page 13, this is a list of the board's rulemaking authority, or some of the rules that the board is requested to adopt. So adding to the existing list of 4 things, you'll see beginning on line 12, standards and procedures for an application and review process applicable to regional dispatch centers required to obtain board approval under this chapter. There were some questions about what that approval process will look like. And so this is specifying it will be worked out in rule. 6, standards and procedures for reviewing and approving the 5-year dispatch plans required under subsection D. Again, that was just a process question. 7, standards and procedures for redefining the service territory of a regional dispatch center if deemed necessary by the board in the interest of public safety. 8, standards and procedures for ensuring every municipality is a member of a regional dispatch center. And that's that in terms of specific rulemaking. So then if you look on the bottom of page 14, you'll see existing laws, line 16, the board is authorized to. And then here's where you'll see 1, 2, and 3, these are all existing powers of the board. And then incorporating into this section, number 4, you've reviewed this yesterday, negotiating or entering into contracts, purchasing, leasing. So this you reviewed again, it's just being moved to a more appropriate section. Line 11, I think you wanted to delete the requirement that the board establishes safety-based response time standards. 6, I think you wanted to specify in terms of the map of wireless communications dead zones that you're specifically interested in areas that don't have access to public safety radio communication service. And then you'll notice what were 5 and 4 in a different subsection. I think you wanted to strike the requirement that the board work with the Department of Public Service to develop a plan to increase wireless communications coverage throughout the state. And shall develop a model process for ensuring every municipality is a member. That's already now incorporated in the rulemaking section. So hopefully that reflects the board's authorities and rule and otherwise. So then on page 16, with respect to the 5-year dispatch plans, I believe you wanted to delete the requirement on line 5 that they map response times for agencies within their service territories. But you wanted some new requirements, new information to be included in their 5-year plan. So on line 16, identification of the municipalities within the regional dispatch center service territory. And 10, identification of the response agencies for whom the regional dispatch center provides dispatch services. So those were the only changes to the 5-year dispatch plans. On page 17, just really a clarification. So this is the registry of response agencies. So those 80 or so local response agencies will all be part of this registry. That's the only change there, it's just clarifying response agency. Then on page 19, line 8, so this is under the existing E911 fund and what disbursements may not be made for. Suggestion is further specify vehicles as emergency vehicles. And then since we used in the other, with respect to the other fund, emergency response vehicles, seemed like that might even be a better, more narrow as opposed to, I don't know.
Does that work? Yes, okay, great,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, so then, getting into the next section, which concerns the regional dispatch fund, the changes that are proposed start on page 20, line 17, and this is a date change with respect to when the collection of the assessment begins. The proposal is to extend it out a year, so beginning in fiscal year 2028, which is calendar year 2027. So 4 years out would be when municipalities start to submit the assessment to the board. And then similarly, and I'll get back to the other changes in that section, you can see on page 21, line 18, again, also setting out another year, beginning in fiscal year 2028 is when the distributions would begin throughout the centers. So then just getting back to some of the other technical changes under the collection formula, you'll see on line 4, just clarifying that it should be the statewide equalized grand list. And then on line 6, I think you wanted to change statewide dispatch budget to total owed to the fund. And then with regard to the formula and some of the terms used in the formula, if you look on line 12, the statewide base fee shall be approved annually by the General Assembly as part of the budget process prior to the board's annual collection of the dispatch assessment. So some legislative oversight. And then there were some questions about what constitutes call volume. This specifies that the board shall define in rule what constitutes call volume for purposes of this subsection and subsection G, which is the distribution formula. And then in addition, the board shall determine an annual assessment rate applicable to the unorganized towns and boards. So the only other substantive change that I will mention, you'll see the stricken language, which refers to subsection I, which is on page 22, starting on line 11. So this is where you had an interim assessment and funding mechanism for new dispatch entities established on or after July 1st. So some proposed changes here. So instead of they shall be subject to the assessment and funding formulas established in this section, they may be subject to those formulas, and then clarify or qualifying that that those formulas will reflect a regional base fee approved by the Joint Fiscal Committee. And this was to reflect that there might not be a statewide base fee at that time. So that's for your consideration. And so I'll pause there, as these are kind of all related to the funding.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. So we have had a healthy discussion about the timing of the funding formula. I think that there's trying to strike the balance between giving local dispatch centers that have operations that work or are about to create something that they've been working toward, giving them the time to adjust to a new sort of structure statewide, and at the same time really trying to meet the needs of places where things are not working, and there's a sense of urgency that we really need to create a regional dispatch center. And Senator Watson and I have been going back and forth on this. She's from a place where things maybe are working a little better, and I'm from a place where things are working not well at all. And so trying to balance that sense of urgency with that sense of needing to create time. This is where we've landed. The 4 years hopefully feels okay. And Maria and I talked about how do we create a structure where the new regional dispatch centers that may be created by the board would have a funding mechanism. They might get a grant to start up their operations from the board, but then they need money to operate the dispatch center once it's operated. So if theoretically a place started in September of 24, they have this new operation, how do we fund it from there? And so instead of requiring them to create this whole new sort of patchwork temporary funding, this would enable them to use the same formula but on a regional basis until the statewide formula was put into place. And Maria and I just discussed this. So if there's something we've missed in here, Stephanie, I see you in the room, so I know maybe. I just circled Joint Fiscal Committee. Picked it up. But that's the intent, is to try to really address both those possibilities, and knowing that it's not going to be perfect for either of them. But Anne, do you have?
No, I just appreciate the 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I get something straight in my head. Under the rulemaking part on page 13, the last line, is it the intent of the committee to prohibit standalone centers like the city of Burlington? it sounds like you're requiring all municipalities to join a regional center. And I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly, because that's not at all what I would have envisioned.
Yeah, I think we have a waiver in another part. Is that?
Okay.
Yeah, where is the waiver?
Because remember, one of the main premises was to not break what's working well.
Exactly, and we talked about those. There are, I think, 6 municipalities in the state that do everything for themselves, basically, is what we've heard. So we created a waiver where
Recommendation coming back next
Oh.
January. Yeah.
we created a recommendation about a waiver process because we weren't exactly sure how to handle it. So it's in the list of things that we would get recommendations for next year.
Very good, thank you.
Because it's not our intent that we force everyone, but we also don't, it's complicated because if somebody's, would they be out of the formula or in the formula, or how do you handle it financially, structurally, operationally? So I think needing some time and recommendations is what we thought. Does that sound okay? Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Barb, how about you? Does that sound?
I think I need to get my head around it a little bit more, but my expectation was, just like the commissioners, that we would not break or not fix what's not broken. And that would include most likely these entities. I think that, if I had to create a waiver process right now, and I guess I would want to make sure this aligns with your intent, is that if a dispatch center is waivered, let's say, it needs to produce some documentation as to how it's meeting the standards that are going to apply to everyone else, right? So that it's equitable and the same level of service, or an adequate level of service as to what is envisioned in the statewide system. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We want to
Okay.
make sure that everybody's on the same, is meeting the same standards and playing by the same rules, essentially.
Okay.
They're doing it, individually, that they're still part of the broader public safety communication system. They still have interoperability, failover, all those things that we've talked about, meet the technical standards. The other thing, I think Burlington, my understanding, and Jennifer, you would know more than me, but I think they are actually trying to partner with neighbors to create a regional dispatch center.
In the last 7 or 8 years, it's been some of each. Some of we want to stay by ourselves, and then I think more recently, that's correct. I believe that there's a lot of interest in the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority. It's how to bridge the gap between needing to continue to pay for services locally while the new center is being brought online.
Right.
So I do believe they're a full partner in that. Go ahead, Barb.
One more question about sort of these waivered entities. Would the expectation be that they do not need to comply with this assessment on the funding model? They be able to keep their funding model unto themselves?
Well, so that is part of the complication for why we would want recommendations back from
Okay.
to figure out how to, because I think you could make the argument either way, like, oh, they should be part of the statewide funding, but it also is a little weird to collect money and then just give it back to the same entity. But if you let municipalities out of the statewide funding formula, then it, and I speak from somebody who knows the education funding formula extremely well. If you let somebody be outside of it, then it decreases the equity that a funding formula creates. And so there would need to be a consideration of how would it, if, for example, Burlington, the largest city in the state, were to be divorced from the funding system that everybody else has to follow, what is the impact of dispatching services statewide? And that is something that is a little too much for us to do the analysis on right now. But I speak from experience of having done that kind of analysis for school districts. It matters. And so I would want you all to really look at the financial impact of having somebody in or out. as well as the technical and public safety impact of having somebody in or out.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything else, committee? Okay, perfect. Maria, go for it.
Then on page 27, so this refers to a section that starts on page 26, but this is that section on interagency cooperation and assistance. You added in yesterday's draft subsection C, which was where the Secretary of Administration could come up with a plan for transferring state-owned infrastructure and equipment to the board. I think you wanted to broaden that a little bit to say, or, and now I'm on page 27, or for establishing protocols for the shared use of such infrastructure or equipment, or both, as deemed appropriate by the Secretary in the interest of promoting public safety consistent with the purposes of this chapter.
So Jennifer, sorry, Commissioner, does that meet your needs? Perfect, thank you.
And you can call me Jen. It's a lot easier, please.
I know. She's far more formal than.
No, you've earned your title, and you're a woman who has that title, and I want to respect that, so.
That's very friendly. Thank you. I appreciate it. But it's just Jen to the rest of the world, so.
Senator, could I add a comment here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that yesterday and in previous conversations, I said that, you know, I've acknowledged that there needs to be a lot more discussion around the infrastructure, the assets, the personnel even. And so what I see with what you've done here is provided a mechanism for those discussions through the Secretary of Administration, where we can get to a logical point. I would suggest that we put the word personnel in there, perhaps, which probably won't make Commissioner Jen happy, but I don't know. I think that there might be a need for that, or maybe it's an and or personnel.
There is another area that deals with that topic.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and we'll get out to get there. That's in another recommendation.
Yeah, there's another.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah,
all right. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
So then moving along on page 29. So this is the membership of the advisory committee. So the only changes proposed here are, you'll see on line 3, 2 firefighters as opposed to 1. And one of those is appointed by the Vermont Fire Chiefs Association.
And so Maria and I went through the list of firefighting associations trying to get one from each. Is the Vermont Fire Chiefs Association the volunteers?
So there are several, what the challenge is, there are several associations
Yes.
of volunteers. And so what we ended up doing is having them appointed by the governor.
Well, none of these
in our bill.
appointees are by the governor in this advisory committee.
So then I would
Because
just keep
This is
it,
a temporary kind of like, we want to hear from the locals and have them have their people on, so.
I think that's the best you can do. I mean,
Yeah.
the challenge is there are several, there is no one organization that speaks for all the volunteers. So
Yeah, and it seemed to us
I think
that
that's
having the 2 chiefs,
Yeah.
the volunteer chiefs and the career chiefs, Jen, what,
that's-
Commissioner, I said it now because you're.
Commissioner Jan, I love
Commissioner-
that.
Yeah,
So I very much enjoy working with Vermont Care Partners. They're very crucial partners, but we neither dispatch for them nor answer phones for them in any municipal or state-run or in a regional construct. So I understand that this is an attempt to be inclusive in perspectives, but I don't think this is going to bring much information to the table. And in fact, it's probably going to muddy the waters for a variety of reasons, because they are governed by very different laws and requirements about how they interface with clients. So I'm not convinced that's a helpful add. I would hope that we could add in a public utility or communication rep with relevant knowledge, somebody from, and I'm trying to toggle between what I prepared in advance of seeing this new draft and now this draft. but I do think that, for lack of a better word, some industry expertise needs to be at the table during the transition period.
Yep.
And I think I'll just leave it there for now. We'll have time to work on the finer points on the other side, but I continue to say with appreciation that the volunteer fire service, whether that's a chief or someone else, should be getting equal airtime as the career firefighters.
Yeah, and that was our intent here with the two appointees. The Vermont Care Partners, we've had a few conversations in here about how do we integrate or attend to the needs of mental health issues and first responders and dispatchers, and had some really good testimony on it. And so we will, in constructing this sort of transition board, making sure they were at the table to have kind of input on how the system works for mental health providers and the potential for dispatching mental health. So that was the attempt with the Care Partners. But hold that thought, Commissioner. Senator Clarkson.
So one group that also is umbrella for mental health professionals are our designated agencies who are already working with us on the troopers. And that's where we get the right, Jen? We get the mental health workers that are embedded in our barracks from the designated agencies. Maybe it would be more appropriate to have the designated agencies here.
But I think Care Partners they are the representatives of the designated agencies.
I don't think, are they? I don't.
I think they are, except that I
Yes.
think one or two are not in.
Yeah, I'm on the Health and Welfare Committee,
Oh, right.
Senator.
No, I know. I think of the 5 designated agencies and I don't think.
There are more than 5
And Julie works.
for Vermont Care Partners.
Okay, got it. And that is, okay.
Yeah,
I hadn't
that's their sort of
realized that.
umbrella organization. Go ahead, Commissioner.
We're back at the discussion from yesterday about scope and definitions matter. Because what you're talking about is operational level, about how we dispatch, what information is provided. Like, we're not talking about building a system of communications. When you start talking about us turning around and providing information to embedded mental health workers or others, we're really into the operational side of things. So at any rate, I'm putting out there that I think that we could be better represented in the transition by a public utility or communications person, and that when we get to promulgating rules, standards for training, et cetera, like that, those things, that's where the operational needs need the diverse perspective.
Okay. Barb, your hand is
So-
up as well.
Yeah, so same topic. I had noticed the Vermont Cares Partner involvement with the advisory committee, and I don't necessarily object to it. And I did hear a different perspective just now when you mentioned involving them in terms of perhaps the mental health or wellness needs of emergency communications professionals. I had not thought of it from that standpoint, so that I have to mull that over a little bit, but because that is a critical piece of the equation here. But when you are talking about the latter things here about response and how different police or EMS agencies respond to mental health crises, that is not a decision that a communication center would make unilaterally, right? It needs to have the involvement and the buy-in and the agreement of all of the appropriate responders. So we can't just start at dispatch or 911, even further removed, quite frankly, and say, this is how we're going to handle response to mental health. It is a much bigger discussion. And so I guess the point here is emergency communications does not include unilaterally dictating specific response configurations to mental health or really to any event, though there are many national standards on how to dispatch certain events, who to notify, which agencies to notify and so forth. But whether that agency sends two people, 3 people, or, a tanker or a ladder truck is typically beyond the comm center, or at least those protocols are created in consultation with all of those responders and not solely at the comm center. So I wanted to make that clear. There was somewhere, and now my notes are a little mixed up too, because I was responding to draft 2.2. There's another reference in there somewhere, or there was, about the interactions between 911 and 988 and developing protocols.
Yes.
I think that I shouldn't just go on my memory for sure.
No, that is still in there. I don't think we took that out. That is still in there. Maria will find it for us.
I would just, I guess I would have the same comment there if I'm remembering it correctly, that is a much, much bigger discussion. There are standards development going on right now at the national level to provide guidelines or standards for how those interactions between 911 and 988 might happen. So when those are done, we will be evaluating them for application in Vermont, but it's still going to be, it couldn't be the 911 board saying this is how it shall be, because, we just don't have that, that expertise or whatever, and how to actually respond. So,
but we'll flag that and come back to
Okay.
that section, the 988, 911 thing, interaction.
Okay.
So for board membership, I just want to be clear, I heard the commissioner about the utility and technical.
yes,
I think that's a good idea as well, and
I do.
And you do too. And what is
Yes.
your thought about having the mental health rep on this advisory committee at this point?
I don't object to it, but I think the expectations would need to be very clear on what the mission of the advisory committee is.
Yeah, and that is spelled out a little bit. If we need to be more clear about that, we can.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
So why don't you look at that section, and then Senator Vyhovsky has a comment.
Yeah, my recollection from some of the testimony that we heard was that there is a need for different types of communication, and that by grounding a certain type of professional in the dispatch center, that in mental health cases, people could be diverted from emergency departments and responded to in a way that was much more trauma informed. And I think that is why this is in here, is really recognizing that we're standing up a new system, and that system should include a completely new response to these mental health cases. So that is why I think that this is included in here. Not to muddy the waters, but in recognition that as we stand up a completely new system, it needs a new bucket, is what it was referred to, in order to respond to these cases. Because what we heard is that there's many instances where people show up at a scene and recognize this is not the right service, but it's all I'm allowed to do. Or they're taking someone to a regional hospital because that's where they've been dispatched to, in spite of the fact that they know that person is having a heart attack. And if they had the right communications equipment, could communicate that to the hospital and take them directly to a level 1 center. And so that is why I think we put this in here as we have this conversation about standing up these communication structures, is to make sure that we have the communication structures to truly respond to what we're seeing.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from, but I'll just reiterate again, I understand where you're coming from, and I'll reiterate that it is not a unilateral decision of the communications function to determine those responses.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I think what we heard is that the communication system currently isn't adequate to make those determinations at all.
Well, as far as like a 911 call flow, we do transfer calls to police, fire, or EMS, and then decisions about how a mental health crisis or situation might be responded to are made at the responder level. Perhaps they already have protocols in place with their dispatchers. Perhaps they don't, but it's made at that level, at the responder level. So
I think this is a healthy debate. And we are late in the game. We
Sure.
did get testimony specifically on this issue that Senator Vyhovsky is referencing. It was really powerful, and I think it was actually from both Drew Hazelton and Will Moran who were talking about this, and this was our attempt to sort of take into consideration that testimony and that need in the field. So I think my proposal at this point is that we leave it in there.
Yep.
And there's plenty of time. And it's also only the advisory committee, which is quite large. So they will have just one seat at a big table. And it's just advisory.
Right, I get, that makes sense, yep.
Yeah, and
understood.
then I think it does make sense to add somebody, what did you suggested, Commissioner, a utility person? Can you be more specific?
Well, in my mind, I was thinking of somebody who's either has knowledge of the telephone industry, internet, how we build resilient communications infrastructure, someone in the telecommunications or public utility world with relevant knowledge. And sorry, I'm not super techy.
We have the Commissioner of Public Service. Do you think that somebody in addition to her?
Well, they're a regulator, right? They're not an actual provider of the service. They build regulations, not go out and fix things and try to make them work when the weather's bad, when, fill the dead zones, et cetera. So I'm talking about a practitioner in the area that these communications are going to rely on.
Okay, so a telecommunications professional appointed by whom? Is there an industry group?
Or ACCD?
Yeah, someone for ACCD or is fine, or the governor or someone else. But I'm really just calling this out as a subject matter expertise on this transitional committee.
DPS or ACCD.
Well, there are trade associations for different providers.
Yeah,
but
then we're gonna
they're
get into the muck of which trade
Right.
association do we choose, kind of like the firefighters. So why don't we say a telecommunications professional appointed by the commissioner of DPS? Because we give the commissioner of the other DPS two appointees, so they each get two essentially. Does that work for you guys okay, great, thank you. All right, it's always the membership of boards often is like the hardest part. So, okay, Maria, go
on
ahead.
page 29, you just added one professional dispatcher to the advisory committee, and that's appointed by the board. On page 30, you just pushed out the sunset date for the advisory committee to 2029 and 2027. Page 31, that's just a technical change, shall, instead it had been listed for each of the different subdivisions, and now it's like a lead-in language, no change there, I just wanted to make that clear. Then on page 32, with respect to the transition process, this gives the board authority, so they have the authority to set up, or they shall seek to set up on or before July 1st, at least one new center. And then also on line 20, this is new language, the board may provide grants for the establishment of new regional dispatch centers or for expanded capacity at existing regional dispatch centers consistent with the purposes of this act. And then a condition that any such grant shall be matched with municipal funds in an amount deemed appropriate by the board.
Now, does this interact with their ability to implement? Do we need to reference here the ability to use the formula on a regional basis?
I think that they would automatically, let's just quickly jump back to that section. They would be considered a new center that may be subject to the formulas.
Do we need to reference the two?
I don't know that you necessarily need to, but maybe.
What page is that?
Yep, I'm gonna. So that is Goodness sakes, you'd think I would
You're
have
using the formula?
memorized this. Okay, so. Oh, it's under the fund, I think. Okay, so on page 22.
Okay.
A
Oh,
new
yes.
regional dispatch center established on or after 2024. So I think they would they fall under that category.
Okay. Is that clear to everyone that how the two could interact with money? Stephanie?
So I'm just looking at page 33 where it's matched with municipal funds and amount deemed appropriate by the board. That's where you might want to reference, because those it would be municipal funds that would be running through the formula and the May part, so.
Yeah, it could say including funds from,
So with municipal funds, yeah, including municipal funds provided through any, if the formula was applied.
match with municipal funds.
Up to
Well,
a
I
re-
guess we wouldn't want to call those municipal funds at that point because they've come up to the state.
With
but-
local funds.
Matched with
Okay.
municipal and or
They could be county.
state funds through this formula.
Yeah.
Yeah, collected through the
Is it
formula.
your intent to disallow a match to be from a private foundation or from an external grant source
Oh,
or?
no, that's a good point. No,
Yeah,
it's
you're
not.
using the word municipal funds, so I think we need to put local funds, because maybe that's a little more ambiguous or something. But Maria would know better. Stephanie would know better.
I think you said local funds and then you referenced including funds that are, derived from the formula.
Yeah,
So that the match, whether it's a donation or if it's local effort
right.
through the formula, that can count as match,
Yeah,
because that.
we want any and all money to be able to be applied to this.
Well,
Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. So this is helpful because just on reading this now, it made me wonder if, we'd be requiring like an additional, something from a city or town's budget. You know what I mean? Like in addition to, as the match, because what I feel like I'm hearing is that is not necessarily the intent.
No, I mean, but it could be part of the funding mix.
Sure.
Or there could be the grant from the board, a local contribution, a private donation, a federal earmark, and money from running the formula on a regional basis.
Would it be allowable? Is that more what you're trying to?
Maybe it's maybe matched with
Oh, yeah.
any and all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe match with any funds they're clever enough to secure.
But I think we do want to just, but we may want to, I think we should reference the funding formula so it's clear. Maybe that's just me being, what do you think, Steph?
I do, because
Yeah,
those are generated locally, so you want to, otherwise it feels like it could be outside of, the board could demand above that somehow.
So I think to make Stephanie and me feel better, we'll reference that directly.
And are we changing,
Yeah, go ahead.
are we changing it to May?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
changing it to May.
Great.
Yeah.
So.
Barb, sorry, do you want to read what you
I'm
have?
just gonna read it back, make sure.
Read back.
So any such grant may be matched with local funds in an amount deemed appropriate by the board, including funds derived from the collection formula in subsection.
Well, because I don't want to call those local funds because if they're state funds. Once they've been collected by the state, then they're state funds. So I would say it may be matched with funds in,
So what's on sub I on page 22 is I think what we're talking about here in this transition period.
Yeah.
So the regional dispatch, because they're not state funds yet, they're the regional dispatch. That's where I think you're connecting.
well, the state would collect them
Yeah.
regionally first. Even if in the interim period, the state would collect them. And then could disperse them back out to a regional dispatch center, because they might be doing it for multiple regional. Maybe,
I'm just trying to say that these are the funds that can be counted as match. That's,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
that's what I'm trying to say in the back on page. Where was it?
Yeah.
Page 33.
Right?
Yeah.
So but maybe matched with, just leave it blank, matched with funds.
With other
There's a-
funds.
there's a match
How about
requirement.
maybe matched with other funds, including
Yeah.
funds from I.
Yeah.
Okay, there, then it would be any kind of money, including that money.
Any and all money.
Oh my gosh, Friday on crossover. Barb, I see your hand up. Did you want to weigh in?
Well, yeah, and probably this can wait, but I'm just kind of struggling with any such grant shall be matched with whatever words you want to put in there in an amount deemed appropriate by the board. So when I see match, I think, you know, if it's $10, you have to match it $10. Or what you saying is we can match it with 10%
Yes,
of, okay. And the board would deem that appropriate across the board likely, or on an individual basis? I guess
I
that's,
think on an individual basis, it would
Okay.
depend on the RDC and the situation.
the situation. Okay, understood. Yep.
And we change it to a may, so it's not a requirement, and it would include those funds. And so I think it gives it flexibility, but makes clear that when you're looking for money, you can run that formula and collect the money and then distribute it back out. So, okay. Keep going.
Okay, so then on page 34, so now we're getting into the recommendations of the board in its initial report to the legislature and governor, which will be submitted in January of next year. So some new items added that reflect some of the things we've just spoken about. On line 5, a recommendation for transferring existing positions within the Department of Public Safety to the board, if deemed appropriate by the board. A recommendation for waiving in whole or in part the dispatch assessment for a municipality that provides dispatch services only for local agencies within its municipal boundaries. 4, a recommendation on how the requirements of this act should apply to municipalities and emergency response agencies that are served by dispatch centers and emergency response agencies outside Vermont. And any other recommendations?
And did we just talk about adding a recommendation to this?
Yes.
Talked
Barb.
about adding members to the permanent board, additional
Oh, yeah, a
members.
recommendation about adding members to the permanent board. Okay, we'll add that there. Senator Clarkson.
So I want to go to Barb's question about positions. So Barb, does number 2 on page 34 fully address your concern about positions and Commissioner Jen's situation? Or are you also interested in a recommendation in addition for not just transferring existing positions, but maybe perhaps having to create new ones?
Actually, if there is a determination that it's more appropriate to create new ones than to transfer existing positions, depending on how all this workload is figured out, I suppose it would be good to have that option there.
Right. I think that may be something we can ask for, maybe Commissioner Jen can't, but we can. And it strikes me that you might want that flexibility.
I think perhaps that would be good to have that option.
So we could just for transferring existing positions or creating new positions and just add it that way. I will note that this bill does create as it is now, we are not the appropriations committee, but 8 new classified positions. And there also is obviously the budget request process that's
right. The key would be, the key is going to be figuring out this radio technology expertise, right? And who's doing what with that. So, so that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, we hear you. Okay, Commissioner.
So I think we need to put a little bit of safeguards here. I think that if we want to have an examination of the appropriate positions within the radio technology shop, which is a division of DPS, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I will fight tooth and nail if a board comes and starts grabbing other positions out of DPS, because that's total overreach.
Yeah,
So,
so is there, do you need a guardrail on that?
yeah,
Number
existing positions within the radio technology shop of Department of Public Safety.
Okay, so the division of radios, whatever. It's a-
Radio, right, it's a
Existing radio technology positions.
radio technology positions, right? It's a budgetary construct called the Criminal Justice Services, but it's a separate division. It's
yeah.
Radio Technology Services, RTS.
Okay, fair, both sides are, yeah, excellent. We'll add both of your suggestions. And
So, and also not transferring potentially those positions, and you also want to say, or creating new positions.
yeah,
As a
so that we're creating new
recommendation. Yeah.
positions, but
Okay.
making sure it's just from that RTS division. Transfer positions. Yeah, okay.
Okay. And then on page 35, this is with respect to the 11 million general fund appropriation. You request that unobligated funds be transferred to the board, or go into this new fund, the transition fund. And I think you wanted to add some additional clarification. As used in this section, unobligated funds includes any amounts for specific dispatch projects, technical expertise, and project management previously approved by the Joint Fiscal Committee.
So Commissioner, I know that I saw the email this morning with you and Senator Kitchell. So this is, I think, what the question was. So I wanted to give you a chance to specifically respond.
Sure, thank you, ma'am. You know, the conversation that we had was that JFC had already agreed that we needed technical and project management expertise. That was when we were on a different path. I think more than ever on the current road we're on, we corporately, not we public safety, but Barb and I, public service, ADS, any partners engaged in this work, including the legislature, could really benefit from some expertise from either people who design public safety communication systems around the country, where the best practices, how should we be thinking about sequencing the work that needs to be done? Because I don't feel like we should wait until next January to start really doing some planning and envisioning and getting some timelines going. So we're willing to put in the legwork, but we need money to pay for consultants. And I mean, even if we just left it at the 260,000 that had already been approved by JFC for project management and technical expertise, we would just use consultants right now to start getting our feet up under us so we hit the ground running. I mean, we're really talking very vaguely right now, and we need to get much more educated on best practices, what appropriate timelines like goals and benchmarking are reasonable and stuff like that. So particularly as we put together an advisory board, they're going to have a lot of questions that we need somebody to turn to answer.
Right, and I think the intent is that this act would take effect on passage in most cases. And so immediately the 911 board would have access to those funds to hire technical assistance. It wouldn't be they wouldn't have to wait until January. They could do it as soon as the bill passes and is signed into law. So this specific language was added to make it clear that it's whatever money is unobligated that hasn't actually already been spent. But I know that there's still an ongoing conversation about that money. So
right. None of it has been spent. None of it has been spent.
Okay.
You're proposing to do that imminently, like now during this session, to try and jumpstart the conversations in the state team.
right. Barb, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yeah, so I'm going to just repeat what I've said before on the issue of the the $11 million. And it's my opinion that none of that money should be dispersed before we know what's going to happen with this bill, for example. And once we know who is going to be the authority on this issue, that authority should then be able to access those funds for the technical consultants and project managements and folks and perhaps other things. But I think it would be, I think it's key to wait until we know who the authority is so that they can lead that in the direction that they deem appropriate. Rather than, I think it's better to wait. I'll leave it there.
Okay, I think for now, I know this conversation is gonna continue next door. So I think leaving it right now, so it's clear that it's all the money would transfer. And then I think the commissioner and the director and this Senator Kitchell and I and others will have this broader conversation about what's happening with that money. So let's leave this for now, knowing that it might change or, yeah, so.
Question about money.
Yeah.
I know all of you have been so involved in the money piece. I'm just curious, why do I remember, maybe I'm just fusing things. Wasn't there an additional 20 million that was involved in this whole?
Yep, section 5 and 6 is the
Okay.
20 million. There's
That's-
11 million that was general funds and 9 million that was congressionally directed spending.
Got it. And so
Yeah.
what's happening with that other 9 million?
That is also being transferred.
Okay, great. So it's
If
similar. language.
if
I
it's
just
allowed
don't
by
know.
federal law, so that's the one thing is that we still have to look into what the federal requirements are on that
So the
money,
treasury,
so.
we're still not clear on treasury. on this.
No, so page 35, section 6. So it's for the redesignation of the administrator of that grant would be transferred to the board.
So I'm sorry, so we haven't gotten there yet. Okay, I'm jumping the gun.
No, you're not,
Oh,
because
final.
we're not going over every single section. There wasn't a
Okay,
change
so
to that
sorry,
one.
I just hadn't, I
Yeah.
thought we were done with the money, so great, so there's the 9 million.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, those are the changes.
That's it. Can you point us to the sections that,
Oh,
Uh-oh.
It's tiny.
it's all over. No, just clarifying that the 8 new positions are within
Created
the.
a 911
in-
board.
in the board.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's useful.
that's helpful to Barb. You want the positions in the board.
But Barb, we might like those positions here, you know,
What-
all of us have no staff.
Could you remind me, Maria, the section, I told Barb we'd get back to it, that references the 988, 911.
Yes, so that's in the 5-year plan, dispatch plans. So if you go to page 16. Included in those plans on line 12, number 7. Each center shall include a plan to incorporate dispatching mental health services into any other non-traditional response services, including 988 protocols.
So Barb, this is the section you were, or the language you were remembering, and so I just wanted to give you an opportunity.
I'm sorry, can you refresh my memory what page we're on here?
Page 16, and
Okay,
there's a list of 11 things that
yes,
need to be included in a regional dispatch center 5-year plan.
I see, okay.
Number 7 is the one that you were remembering.
Right, and so I guess my concern here is the same, that it's not the communication center that makes these plans or these determinations about non-traditional response services, including 988 protocols. And I don't know what more to say about it than that. I mean,
Okay.
maybe the plan is, you know, our agencies haven't told us how they're going to handle this or how they're mandated to handle things, because the communications piece of it would be in response to that. Which, yeah, so, yeah, it's not a unilateral decision, I guess is my thing that I'm noting here.
Okay, Senator Clark, Watson.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if we should, because I would not want to take out a plan for incorporating mental health services in general, because I think that's important. I mean, would it be useful to take out the specificity of including 988 protocols? Well, basically, we're just saying like, we want you to have a plan. We're not even saying like.
A plan, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be argumentative here.
That's fine, that's fine.
A plan for what?
Oh, so like how they are addressing dispatching for potential like mental health crises.
Would that not be in response to how the response agencies that they're responsible for are required to respond to them? So I think it's a broader conversation. I'm trying to think of a way to incorporate, because I think it's a good placeholder, but maybe it would be to outline any plans that they have to incorporate this, so that we could get a sense of what exists out there among the agencies. I don't know, Commissioner, is there a statewide response protocol for mental health services? From the
No,
response?
I understand there is not. If I understand the concern correctly, they want to make sure that when an agency who's applying to be recognized as a regional entity puts together their 5-year plan, that they articulate how they intend to partner with mental health responders, whether those are crisis workers or embedded workers. And I think that's something that we can work out either on the other side or provide a little more clarity
Right.
before we get there. So I don't think it's hair on fire, because it's part of how we craft the requirements of the application to become a recognized regional center. So if I said that correctly, I think we can wait, is what I'm saying, Barb.
Okay, I wonder if, in hearing you're talking about it though, I'm wondering if this would put it on the regional dispatch center, and maybe it's something that the board at the state level needs to talk about, rather than the individual regional dispatch centers having a plan for it. Maybe it's one of the recommendations that we asked for from the board. What do you think about that?
I think it would be more logical to ask for the plan from the response agencies of how they incorporate a response to mental health services.
Oh, from like the EMS and fire and police.
Right, and then the communications piece of that would need to align with that, unless there's some broader statewide policy that says this is how all responders will handle these types of situations. I don't think it's for the communications center or even a communications board necessarily to make that determination unilaterally. I mean, we can't, right? So we don't know, for example, where embedded mental health folks are, and which agencies have them, which don't.
Right.
They're all required to, and so forth. But I think there's a lot of discussion here, and I may not be understanding the finer points of what you're getting to. So maybe it's fine to leave it here and then just continue the conversation as we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senator, you want to weigh in, or?
No, I think that's fine. The small piece I'll say is what we've heard from the responders is there is a disconnect between what is happening for them and dispatch and communication. And I think that's what we're trying to bridge.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll just keep talking about it.
Yeah,
I'm
let's
certainly
leave
happy
it-
to do that.
let's leave it in for now and maybe, unless Maria, do you have a?
Well, I was just gonna say, since there might not be technical plans, maybe just say they'll include a description of any efforts to incorporate dispatching mental health. So they'll but they give that information to the board as part of their plans, and then the board at least knows what's underway.
Yeah, and it seems this is a plan within a plan too, so the double plan
Yeah.
is a little, so maybe just
Description of any efforts to incorporate mental health services.
that sounds good.
Okay.
And then we could get rid of the including 988 protocols, because that sounds like it's outside of their purview, because that's a much bigger system. So let's just delete the including 988 protocols. Senator Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Especially because there's a lot of, I think that needs to be discussed about this. I wonder if we could not add as a list of, like on page 34, we've got, we're asking for a bunch of recommendations, just adding a recommendation around any potential statewide policy for responding to mental health crises.
Yeah, I think that's good. Because it seems like there's a broader conversation to be had. So we'll just add a thing, and then that can come back to us next year, and the recommendation could be that you say somebody else should do this. That's still a recommendation.
Okay.
No, that's not good. We need someone specifically who's gonna do it.
Oh, yeah, say specifically who that someone else is.
Yeah, sadly, the report we come on.
Okay.
You're done, but.
I think that we've gone through the whole draft. Maria has some changes that need to be made. Maria, do you have questions for us about what you're doing, what you're changing at this point?
I think I'm okay. I just, on that last point, I just want to make sure I get the recommendation right for the incorporate. Was it just incorporating mental health services into the public safety communication system? So make sure I.
Yeah.
The recommendation.
For the recommendation.
Mental health
Yeah.
response to mental health.
Yeah.
Or
Emergency or for public,
dispatching.
public safety responses.
Yeah, public safety responses to.
I think it's public safety
response.
not, yeah.
Can you go in the hall with Maria and work out that
Yeah,
language?
sure, that's fine.
Okay, so Barb,
I have one thing Maria might be interested in, actually, of course, I'm sure she's interested in everything I have to say, but you asked yesterday, Maria, on, well, what was then page 7, line 11, talking about the definition of municipality and whether or not it could be truncated in the existing statute, or if it should be, like you had it written, refined further towards the end of this bill. Is that ringing a bell where we?
yes.
Okay, so the first definition allows the board to require political subdivisions of the state. We think, after talking with the board staff, that it should stay the way it is now in the statute, because that allows us to require those political subdivisions, like schools, I think is the example you gave, to meet our addressing requirements and other requirements. It doesn't let them have essentially a carve out for that, for meeting those requirements, which would not be good. So if it stayed the same in the first part of this bill, but then was defined more precisely later on, that would work for us.
okay.
And then
That's great.
there was another question about private safety agencies. We believe this should remain as it likely refers to these private EMS agencies, hospitals, perhaps the Vermont National Guard, UVM, 988, those types of organizations. So that's what was in mind there. And then Senator Hardy, you have one more comment if you have
Sure.
the time and the patience for it. I think that so many of the things that were talked about today addressed the things I outlined in the notes I sent over this afternoon, almost to the point where you might want to just take those down and let me, let me redo them. Or you can keep them there as a placeholder, I suppose, for the things that have been addressed. But I think one thing that might not be entirely clear is, it goes back to what the commissioner said about clear definitions. what are you really talking about? What is being specifically referred to when you say regional dispatch centers? And I have a reference to page 3, line 7, and this would be in draft 2.2. Are you referring to the existing regional PSAPs, Hartford, St. Albans, Lamoille, and Shelburne? Or are you also including other existing dispatch centers, including the one municipality centers? And this may be addressed with this waiver process that's now been incorporated.
So what section?
So Barb, there is there's a definition of regional dispatch center on the bottom of page 7 in this new draft.
Okay, let me get that.
It's been in there for the last couple drafts, but just so it's paragraph
Yes.
17.
Okay, regional dispatch center means a facility that provides regional dispatch safety dispatch services, sorry, it's late, and may also be a public safety answering point. Shall be the state dispatch centers. A dispatch center that is operational on the effective date of this act. So dispatch center here in B would include like the single agents, the single municipality.
It would.
Okay.
And then on the next page is a union municipal district or public authority. So that would be if a bunch of municipalities
Yep.
get together and decide to create their own. So we tried to address what currently exists and that what might come into play.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. I wasn't quite getting it, but I do see it there now. Thanks.
Okay, great. So unless there are other changes that are or clarifying, Barb and Jen, are we good to go for now? Excellent. Thank you both so much. So I think what we'll do right now, unless the committee has anybody, Bob, do you have anything are you comfortable with where we're at? Senator White, are you comfortable?
I'm feeling good.
I am not comfortable, like this feels really rushed to me and I have a lot of concerns that just feel unanswered. I recognize we're up against a crossover deadline and I feel like this needs more time for me to really feel comfortable with it. There's parts I don't understand, there's parts that leave me really concerned that we're not including our state employees' voices. So I really actually at this point don't feel very comfortable with the bill.
Okay.
It just feels like a really important project and we're almost there, but it doesn't feel to me like we have had adequate time with the language in the bill.
Okay. Senator Clarkson?
So that sadly, I think, is one of the things that as a House member moving to the Senate, I had to get used to sadly. And I'm not saying that this will answer your concern here, but I think in some ways, we've done so much that's great with a thorny issue that we have not been able to get our hands around. But I think even just having a draft at this point that's as comprehensive and as thoughtful as this one is, isn't perfection. But the House, we just don't have the time to do what I think we all, coming from the House, expect that a bill will have before we send it to another body. And I've had to learn how to be comfortable with sketching something and letting the House fill it in. And I don't mean to say that this is just a sketch, because I think this is more than a sketch. I think you guys have done a terrific job. But I also know our time limits, and I also know that our concerns can be addressed in the House. And I know there are concerns around the table that, this is by no means ready to enact. This represents a limit, the best work we could do at the time we had available. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. I also know I've gotten comfortable with sending a big idea to the Senate, to the House to do some further work on. And that's where I think we've really gotten a handle on, we have something. This is the first time in 7 years we've gotten something actually to the House on dispatch. So I'm quite honestly thrilled having served on this committee for that time. So I'm thrilled we're not at the end goal. We're not at the end. I don't disagree with you, but I'm gonna support this effort because it's like step one. This is step one in a long process. So I hear you, but I'm also gonna support, what I consider, maybe even beyond step one, but really a good first step forward.
Senator Watson.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there are specific changes that might make
that.
you feel more comfortable with
Well,
it.
and I think twofold, like, again, I think, I hear you, and I have not had enough time to wrap my head around this to even be fully convinced this is a sketch in the direction that I feel we should be going. I really think that we should be working towards a glide path of a unified dispatch system that is grounded in our state workers, and I don't see any of that in here. And so I don't know. I mean, I think a step would be finding representation for our state workers who currently do this work in this bill, but I am building the comfort sending sketches that are not fully baked, but this, I haven't had enough time to really be on the page that this is a sketch of a picture that I can support. Maybe it is, I don't know.
Okay, Senator Norris, did you weigh in? How are you feeling?
No, I feel good about it. I mean, obviously, we talked about the bill for another 6 months, I guess, if we wanted to, but fact of the matter is that I think that it's well intended. I think there's been a lot of work put on the bill. When the worst case scenario is going over the House, you have ops and they're gonna still here within the building here. And even worst case scenario, it may come back to us.
Well, it will come back to us because
It's
they're
gonna come
gonna
back.
make changes to it and.
So we're gonna see it again.
We're gonna
is
see
what
it
I'm saying,
again.
yeah, I mean-
We'll get to see it again, and it has 2 more stops in the Senate before it even gets to the
Yeah,
floor.
but we want to get it out today, obviously.
We
just
have to
the
get it out
crossover,
today or it dies, and so, or we have to get a rule change. I'm asking the committee to trust the work that we've done and to, Senator Watson and I have worked really hard on getting this draft to where it is. Executive Director Neal and Commissioner Morrison have worked really hard with their shops to get this to where it is. We heard a lot of testimony from people from all over the state. And I know it's not perfect, but I'm actually really impressed we got this far.
I mean, Barb, I'm looking at Barb up there. Barb and I have been in this room working on aspects of this issue for a long time. And I think actually, thank you to Anne and to Ruth and to Jen and to Barb and particularly Maria. No, I was saving the best for last. I think we've got something that we in shape that we haven't had yet. So this is exciting, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, a special thank you to both Jen and Barb, because I think that they both gave a lot on this. And I had lengthy conversations with both of them saying, can you help me imagine this new world order? And they did, so thank you. But Senator Vyhovsky, I hear you, and I'm sad that I didn't realize your level of discomfort earlier, and that we could have addressed it earlier had I known that. At this point, I think that the best that we can do is, Maria, if you can make the changes that we just suggested, we're going to move to another bill, and then when you're ready, if you can just pop back in. Senator Vyhovsky, if you and Senator Watson might find a place to go chat for a little bit and maybe talk about the bill and see if you can start feeling more comfortable with it while we move to our next bill. And if you ultimately don't, I respect that, and you can, vote your conscience. But if you would be willing to have that conversation, we'll make sure you get back to vote on the other bill too.
Great.
Okay, all right, thank you. But nobody else can leave.
Oh, yeah,
because-
we stand up. Please.
Thank you so much, Jen and Barb, for your really great work. And, you know, there's a long path, so you'll be up on the screen for other people as well.
All right, ma'am, do you want me to stay here? Do you want me to stay here for the next topic? Because I think I'm
Oh,
on.
for the sheriff, for S-17, sure. Yes, absolutely. And Barb,
Very
thank you so much.
I will depart. Thank you very much, everyone.
We'll see you,
Thank
we'll
you,
see you
Barb.
soon. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, can we take a 2-second
Okay.
stretch?
We're gonna go off live and we're gonna just take a few minutes to stretch.